right, guys, what's going on? Welcome to tonight's teaching. This is Torah portion Shelach. Yes, Shelach. Try saying that a couple times fast. And we're going to be looking at numbers 13 through 15. And the word Shelach translates to send for yourselves. And we're going to look at what that means. And we're going to see a lot of different things play out. Last week we saw a few interesting situations and scenarios. So this week we're going to continue that and see where it takes us. So first off, let's get a little recap going on. Excuse me. Little recap. So we talked about last week, we talked about the ritual of setting apart the Levites from the children of Israel. We talked about the regulations surrounding the second Passover and went over what all that meant. If you didn't see the teaching from last week, make sure to check that out because there's going to be a lot of stuff that kind of ties in from this week as well. Then we looked at living a Moedim-centered life void of excuses, and we saw how when the second Passover came around, there was no excuse after that point. And we kind of looked at how do we analyze our own lives and how do we center our own lives around the things of Yah. We made this bold statement that your focus shows your priorities, and in the light of what we were talking about with Passover, and then we kind of went into some of the other Moedim, into Shabbat, into your study of the Word, into pretty much everything. How does your life revolve? Does it revolve? Do you try to take the things of Yah and fit them in, or do you allow your life to fit into the things of Yah? We talked about trusting Yah's timing, what that looked like. There was a lot of things going on. We talked about how the children of Israel, they only moved when Yah moved. When the cloud moved, that's when they moved. And so we talked about, are we trusting Yah's timing? Do we think things aren't going fast enough in our life? Do we think things are going wrong in our lives? But just being able to sit back and trust his timing. And then we talked about grumbling. We saw this thing that's going to keep persisting, I feel like, as we continue to go on. There was grumbling within the camp. And we saw that Yah gave them meat to eat. And we talked about how just because God gives you something doesn't necessarily mean that it's what he actually wants. Then we saw the story of Miriam and Aaron grumbling and complaining about Moses. And get rebuked directly by Yah. I mean, this is a pretty intense story. But then we see the humility and the great leadership qualities of Moses come through when he actually intercedes on their behalf and asks for God's mercy to be upon them. Just an incredible story. So that's kind of what we talked about last week. So this week, we're jumping right in on Numbers 13. And we're going to jump in. There's a lot to cover tonight, so let's see how it goes. Numbers 13, verse 1. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, "Send some men on your behalf to investigate the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the children of Israel. Each man you are to send will be a prince of the tribe of his fathers, a man from each tribe." Now, what's interesting, I read it mostly out of the TLV translation. And the TLV translation is one of the only translations that actually get this right. A lot of the translations will say, send men to investigate. There are a couple that will say send for yourselves, which is similar. But the TLV is one of the few that actually does get this right. And it's interesting because this kind of points to this idea that Yah might not have approved of it, but he did allow it. He's like, all right, send it for yourselves. Not for me, for yourselves. You send it. Because, see, we have to remember that Yah had already promised them the land, right? We read that prior. He said that I'm sending an angel, a messenger before you that is going to prepare the way, that's going to drive out the enemies in front of you. Like he said, I'm going to be there, right? So it's really interesting that they still wanted, even though they knew the commands of Yah, they knew what Yah had already said, they still were looking to send some men out. And this word investigate, so it says send men on your behalf to investigate. And the word investigate there is to meander. It's almost like a tourist. They're just taking a look around. They're just going to walk in and be like, oh, hey, look, oh, look. Yep, oh, yeah, God said that was over here. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we see that. Oh, he said this was, oh, yeah, we see that. Right? So it's not a very specific direction. They're just going to go in there and say, okay, yep, it's here. We see it. It's good. Like a tourist would. Walk around, take some pictures. So Yah agreed for them to go take a look and see what he said was true. He was like, okay. If that's what you need to do, then go ahead. And we're going to jump ahead in the Torah to the next book in Deuteronomy, because in Deuteronomy chapter 1, Moses really lays out some more details as to what's going on. So Deuteronomy chapter 1, starting in verse 9, I spoke to you at that time, saying, I am not able to bear the burden of you by myself. Adonai your God has multiplied you, and here you are today, like the stars of the heavens in number. May Adonai, God of your fathers, increase you 1,000 times, as many as you are, and may he bless you just as he has promised you. How can I bear your load and burden and bickering by myself? Choose for yourself wise and discerning men, well known to your tribes, and I will appoint them as your head. So what we're reading here now, if you remember from last week's teaching and last week's Torah study, this is exactly what was happening in chapter 10. It's almost like word for word exactly what was just read in chapter 10. But we're going to see some different details going on. You answered me and said, the thing you have said to do is good. So I took the heads of your tribes, men who are wise and well known, and appointed them as heads over you, leaders of thousands, leaders of hundreds, leaders of 50s, leaders of 10s, and officials for your tribes. I commanded your judges at that time, saying, hear cases between your brothers and judge fairly, between a man and his brother, or the outsider with him. You must not show partiality in judgment. You must hear the small and the great alike. Fear no man, for the judgment is God's. The case that is too hard for you, you shall bring to me, and I will hear it. I commanded you at that time everything you should do. Then we journeyed from Horeb and went through all that great and terrible wilderness that you saw on the way to the hill country of the Amorites, as Adonai, our God, commanded us. Then we came to Kedesh Barnea. I said to you, you have come to the hill country of the Amorites, which Adonai, our God, is giving to us. See, Adonai, your God, set the land before you. Go up, take possession, as Adonai, God of your fathers, has promised you. Do not be afraid or discouraged. And here's where we get a little bit more details on the story. Then all of you came near to me and said, let's send men ahead of us to explore the land for us and bring back word about the way we should go up and the cities we will enter. So check this out. This is interesting. How at this point in time, before they've come to this point where they're talking about sending people into the land, how were they being led? Think about that. How were they being led? They were being led by the cloud, by the Spirit. So we just read in the last chapter, or in the last Torah portion, how they did not move unless the cloud picked up and moved, or the fire picked up and moved, the Spirit picked up and moved, right? They didn't move unless that thing said move. Now, in verse 22 of Deuteronomy 1, they're saying, let's send men ahead of us. That means the cloud hasn't moved, to explore the land for us and bring back word about the way we should go. So now they want men to lead them. Now there's no longer this reliance on the cloud. They want men to go, and they want men to bring back word of what they should do. Even though Yah has already told them, he already told them, I'm sending a messenger ahead of you. I'm sending an angel ahead of you, and I'm going to clear the way. This land belongs to you, and you're going to take possession of it. But now they're asking for men to go and lead the way. Verse 23, the idea seemed good to me. This is Moses speaking. So I took 12 men from among you, one man for each tribe. They turned and went up into the hill country, and they came to the Wadi Eshal and spied it out. So there's so many more little details in the Deuteronomy 1 writing of that we kind of missed just in the numbers. So that kind of brings us back around full circle to where we're at. So we jump back into Numbers, where we're at in the portion. So according to the word of Adonai, excuse me, Moses sent them from the wilderness of Paran. All the men were princes of the children of Israel. These are the names from the tribe of Reuben: Shemuah, son of Zakur. From the tribe of Simeon, Shaphat, son of Hori. From the tribe of Judah, Caleb, son of Jephunneh. From the tribe of Issachar, Igal, son of Joseph. From the tribe of Ephraim, Hoshea, son of Nun. From the tribe of Benjamin, Palti, son of Raphu. From the tribe of Zebulun, Gadiel, son of Sodi. From the tribe of Manasseh, part of the tribe of Joseph, Gadi, son of Susi. From the tribe of Dan, Amiel, son of Gamali. From the tribe of Asher, Sethur, son of Michael. From the tribe of Naphtali, Nabi, son of Vophsi. I'm sorry. Some of these names. From the tribe of Gad, Geuel, son of Maki. These are the names of the men Moses sent to investigate the land. Now he gave Hoshea, son of Nun, the name Joshua. So let's look at some of these names. We always talk about what's in a name, and I'm just gonna run down the list of the names of the princes and their fathers, who they came from, and it's just some neat little nuggets in these names. So the first one it listed was hear and obey and remember. To judge or govern, a cave or a hole. One of them means a dog, and it means to turn. It means he redeems, he increases. Salvation, to increase by propagation. I thought that was really good. Escape, cured. El is my fortune, counsel, existence, horse. El is my kinsman, camel. Conceal, who is like El. Hide and add. And the majesty of El, and to grow poor. So these are all the meanings of those names that we just listed. So if you go back and pause this, you can look and you can kind of compare and contrast them with the different actual names that were listed. But it's so neat to see the names of people that were chosen. So the first set of names are the people that were the princes, and then the second names are their father's names, or what their father's name meant. So kind of where they came from, that's their heritage, but then that's who they are as a person. So back into it, verse 16. These are the names of the men Moses sent to investigate the land. Now he gave Hoshea, son of Nun, the name Joshua. And I wanted to repeat this verse because it's very interesting to see this. So Hoshea in the Hebrew means salvation. Now Joshua is Yehoshua, or Yeshua for short, and it means Yah is my salvation. So I think it's great that Moses was changing his name. He said, okay, you've been known as salvation, but I don't want you to get puffed up and arrogant about what's going to happen. So I'm going to make sure that you understand that Yah is your salvation, that you have nothing to do with this, but it is through the power of Yah that you are going to accomplish what you're going to accomplish. Verse 17. As he sent them to explore the land of Canaan, he said to them, go up there through the Negev, then go up into the hill country. See what the land is like and the people living there, whether they might be strong or weak, few or many. In what kind of land are they living? Is it good or bad? Also, what about the cities in which they are living? Are they unwalled, or do they have fortifications? How is the soil, fertile or poor? Are there trees on it or not? Do your best to bring back some of the fruit of the land. It was the season for the ripe berries, or the ripe grapes. So to me, this is sounding like it's turning into more of a militaristic recon and not a tourist visit. Because here's the thing. Yah said it's yours, and Yah said that it's a land flowing with milk and honey that will flourish, that is plentiful. So why are they still thinking they need to send people into the land to find this stuff out? Because see, here's the thing. When God gives you a promise, when God gives you something to look forward to, then the promise is the promise. So this is really just kind of showing more of the doubt that is involved in the camp of Israel. Verse 21, so they went up and explored the land from the wilderness of Zin as far as Rehob, the entrance of Hamath. They continued up through the Negev and came to Hebron. There lived Ahiman, Sheshai, and Talmai, descendants of Anak. Hebron was built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. When they reached as far as the valley of Escol, they cut a single branch with a cluster of grapes. It was carried on a pole between two of them. They also cut some pomegranates and some figs. Can we talk about the idea of needing 2 people to carry 1 branch with a cluster of grapes on it? That's must be massive. They returned from investigating the land after 40 years. Or 40 days, I'm sorry. After 40 days. So it took them 40 days to travel all over. And if you look at a map, they actually went all the way from down in the Negev, which is close down to Egypt, all the way up through what would be eventually the Promised Land. And they spied out the entire land. There was, it doesn't to me look like there was an inch that wasn't uncovered. Verse 26, they traveled and returned to Moses, Aaron, and the entire community of the children of Israel at Kedesh in the wilderness of Prtion. They gave their report to them and the entire assembly. They showed the land's fruit. They gave their account to him and said, we went into the land where you sent us. Indeed, it is flowing with milk and honey. This is some of the fruit. So they brought back some of that fruit, and they're like, look, here's the proof that what Yah said is true. What Yah said is true. The land is flowing with milk and honey. Here's the fruit. Look at how plentiful. Look how big this grape cluster is, right? Well, there's a problem. Except, oh no, the people living in the land are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw the sons of Anak there. So now they're starting to doubt. Everything so far that God has promised is true. But because they see the people that are living there, that part of the promise, now they don't want to believe it. Amalek is living in the land of the Negev. The Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites are living in the mountains. And the Canaanites are living near the sea and along the bank of the Jordan. Then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, we should definitely go up and capture the land, for we can certainly do it. So Caleb was like, guys, don't worry about that. Don't worry about what you see. He's the one that's full of faith and courage. But the men who had gone up with him said, we cannot attack these people because they are stronger than we. They spread among the children of Israel a bad report about the land they had explored, saying, the land through which we passed to explore devours its residents. All the people we saw there are men of great size. This word bad report in the Hebrew is debah, and it actually means slander or defaming. Slander or defaming. So the report that they brought was a slanderous report. It was one that defamed something or someone. So who could that be? So let's look at something here. We're gonna back up and look at a couple things because we're gonna break this down. So verse 31. But the men who had gone up with him said, we cannot attack these people because they are stronger than we. So I want to point a couple things out because this was an interesting study. I remember doing this last year, and when we got back around to it this year, I dug a little deeper and kind of looked at a few things. So I want to look at the Hebrew of this phrase, stronger than we. So I actually pulled up a screenshot of the lexicon, and I want to show you something here. I'm going to see if I can get my mouse to come over here to this screen and record. I got to find it. Hold on. Time out. Let me find it. See if I can get it to come over here. Oh. I'm sorry. I can't. It won't let me see. Okay. It's not letting me put my mouse over there. That's okay. That's okay. So here's what I want us to look at. If you look at the very bottom, and if I'm looking over this way, it's because I'm looking at the same screen you guys are. If you look over at the very bottom, the very last word where it says for us, what's next to it? There's nothing next to it. So in this lexicon, there's nothing next to for us. So what is that? There's no word for there. There's no word there. What is that word? So according to this lexicon, then really it should say, we should go up against the people, for they are too strong. Okay, well, that changes it a little bit. So I was like, okay, well, let me go look into the Hebrew. So let's go. I've got another shot here. Here's breaking down the actual Hebrew a little bit further. And if we look at the very bottom of this, it says then we, which is the same thing as the last one said, then us. Some of them say then we, some of them say then us. Well, here it says there's this Hebrew word, mimenu. Mimenu. And I was like, hold up a second. That says that word is the then we, stronger than we, except for if we look here on the far right column, we see that word in the Hebrew is actually a preposition. That word is actually a preposition. It is not the word we. So something's wrong here. And so as I'm digging in this, I'm like, okay, something's not making sense. How can I figure this out? So what I did then was, I took both of these and I put them next to each other. And I started looking, and if you find the Hebrew word that's translated as then we on the left, that mimenu, well, let's go over to the right screen, and it says mimenu, for they are too. For the people are too strong. Well, I got looking at that. Well, that's the same word. So how come this one's looking at for they are too as the preposition, and this one over here is putting it as than we? Oh, man. A little bit different. So one has 448 in the Strongs as a preposition. The other one says it means than we. So what is it? So I think the key to understanding this is the order that it should be understood in. So the Hebrew reads a little bit differently. It's kind of like reading in a different language. Sometimes they put the words out of order because it doesn't make the same sense in our English language. So really, we could say that this should say, we are not able to go up against the people, for stronger are they than we. But if we keep looking into this word a little bit deeper, all right. So if we could look at this word, and I looked it up in another Hebrew lexicon so I could figure this out. I actually went to the actual Hebrew wording so I could read the whole sentence in Hebrew. And I found there's this other little word that's missing. And it's this Hebrew word, who. The Hebrew word, who. And if you go back, I'm going to back up one screen. If you go back here, you'll see it right on the left-hand side next to the bottom. 1931, who. 1931, who. And here it says it. So if we figure this out, we're looking at this, okay, now we put it back in the correct order, we'll see we are not able to go up against the people we are not able to go up against. The people are stronger than it. The people are stronger than who? The Hebrew word who. The people are stronger than who? Well, this Hebrew word who is a third person singular pronoun. We is not a singular pronoun. Us is not a singular pronoun. So the translation that says stronger than we or stronger than us is misleading. So here's the thing. The word who can be translated a couple different ways. It can be translated it can be translated she, and it can be translated as he. So this verse should be translated because they are stronger than he. Excuse me. They are stronger than he. Who's the he they're talking about? Well, it's explained in the next verse, right? Verse 32 calls it a slanderous report. Why is it slanderous? Because they are talking negatively. They are slandering the name of he, the name of Yah, because who gave them the promise? Yah gave them the promise that the land was theirs. They could go in and take it. It was theirs. But they decided to give a slanderous report of the name of Yah. Let's continue on. We also saw there were Nephilim. The sons of Anak are from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our eyes as well as theirs. So these are the Nephilim that we've talked about before. We're not going to go and do another deep study or anything on the Nephilim because there's a lot of good things. But the sons of Anak were known to be giants. They were known to be big men. That's why it says we seemed like grasshoppers. They even said, even in our own eyes, these guys are so big that we feel like we're grasshoppers. And I know they've got to think we're grasshoppers. So any questions on chapter 13? If you've got any questions, you can type them in the comments. Or if you're watching this replay, you can send us an email at info@517ministries.com, and we will answer your questions as best as we can. We always want to make room for questions and people to learn and understand. And all this is going to tie in as we continue to look through the rest of this Torah portion. All of these chapters kind of link together and then culminate into one big ending, which is pretty awesome. All right, let's jump on to Numbers 14. All through that night, the entire community raised up their voices. The people wept. All the children of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole community said, "If only we had died in Egypt. If only we had died in this wilderness." Why is Adonai bringing us to this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our children will be like plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to return to Egypt? They said to each other, "Let's choose a leader and let's go back to Egypt." Oh my goodness gracious. They don't even know what they're asking for. They have fully lost hope and faith in what Yah can do. Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before the entire assembly of the community of the children of Israel. Joshua, son of Nun, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had explored the land, tore their clothes as a sign of mourning. They said to the whole assembly of the children of Israel, "The land through which we passed is an exceptionally good land. If Adonai is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land and will give it to us, a land flowing with milk and honey." He's trying to get them to turn around. He's like, guys, look, this is what God's promised us. If he's pleased with us, he's going to give us the land. But we got to fix ourselves. We got to turn these attitudes around. Only don't rebel against Adonai, and don't be afraid of the people of the land. They will be food for us. The protection over them is gone. Adonai is with us. Don't fear them. They understood. They understood what was going on. But the whole assembly talked about violently stoning them. Then the glory of Adonai appeared at the tent of meeting to all the children of Israel. Have you ever felt like that? Like when you've been trying to tell people the truth about Scripture, and you felt like they were going to get it, they were going to turn around, and then next thing you know, that you feel like they're about to stone you? I know I have. Adonai said to Moses, "How long will these people treat me contemptibly? How long will they neglect to trust in me, in spite of all the miraculous signs I have performed among them?" Whenever we're looking at the children of Israel and we're studying the Torah, be very careful that you don't get self-righteous and looked down on the children of Israel. They had the miraculous signs and wonders in front of their physical eyes, and they still had problems. So I know it's so easy to be like, oh, well, if I was, no, you'd have done the same thing. You might have had the opportunity to be a Joshua or a Caleb, but the chances are you would do the same thing. The same thing you're doing today without being able to see God is the same thing you would have done back then if you could see him. There's no difference. They had it, and they still didn't get it right. I will strike them with the plague. I will destroy them. But you I will make into a nation greater and stronger than they. Moses said to Adonai, and what a man of character Moses was. Like, he blows my mind when I'm reading this stuff. The Egyptians will hear about it because you brought up this people by your power from among them. They will tell the residents of this land about it. Already they have heard that you, Adonai, are in the midst of this people, that you, Adonai, have been seen eye to eye, that your cloud remains over them, and that in a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night you go before them. If you kill these people all at once, the nations who have heard this report about you will say, because Adonai was unable to bring his people to the land he had promised them, he has slaughtered them in the wilderness. So please, Adonai, let Adonai show his strength, just as you have spoken, saying, Adonai is slow to anger and abundant in loving kindness, forgiving iniquity and transgression. Still, he does not leave the guilty unpunished, bringing the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and the fourth generation. Forgive now the guiltness of this people in accordance with the greatness of your loving kindness, just as you have pardoned this people from Egypt until now. So Moses was more concerned about Adonai, and he was so concerned about his name possibly being tarnished that he pled for mercy over the children of Israel, who multiple times have tried to overthrow him, have tried to stone his leadership, have tried to turn the people back to Egypt, all the work he did to get them there, and he still is concerned more about Adonai's name being profaned. If we can get that in our mind, that it's not about us, that it's not about what's going on around us, but if we can have such a reverence for the name of Adonai, that we would plead for mercy on our enemies. That blows my mind. So Adonai answered, I have forgiven them just as you have spoken. But as certainly as I live, and as certainly as the glory of Adonai fills the earth, none of the people who saw my glory and my miraculous signs I have performed in Egypt and in the wilderness, yet tested me these 10 times and did not obey my voice, not one of them will see the land I promised to their forefathers. None of those who treated me with contempt will see it. And this is what I want us to understand. Forgive does not equal forget. Okay? And I know in a lot of circles that this idea of forgive and forget, like you're just supposed to forget and everything's peachy, everything's good. No, forgiveness does not equal everything's golden again. Forgiveness does not mean there's things that are going to happen, because the thing we have to remember is that sin still has its consequences. Sin still had its consequences. And we're going to see that as we continue on. He forgave them. But even in their forgiveness, none of those that held him in contempt got to see the promised land that he promised to their forefathers. Verse 24, however, my servant Caleb, because a different spirit is with him, and he is wholeheartedly behind me, I will bring him into the land where he went. His offspring will inherit it. Now, since the Amalekites and Canaanites are inhabiting the valley, turn back tomorrow and set out by the wilderness route toward the Sea of Reeds, where they just came from, the miracle that got them saved from Egypt. Now they're having to go back to that place. So Yah is sending them back into the wilderness to carry out his judgment. And I'm going to say a couple things here that might step on some toes. But here's the thing. The wilderness can be a place of testing and proving, or it can be a place of judgment. And we see that here. Yah was using The first time they came through the wilderness, it was a place of testing and a place of proving. He was like, all right, we're there. He tested them. They failed the test. Now the wilderness is becoming a place of judgment. And I'm going to say this. Too many people claim the wilderness they are in is a time of proving, not realizing it is the judgment of Yah being carried out on their disobedience. I'm going to say that again. Too many people claim the wilderness they are in is a time of proving, not realizing that it is the judgment of Yah being carried out on their disobedience. How many times have you ever heard somebody going through a hard time? Oh, I'm just having a wilderness experience. Well, you had like 7 wilderness experiences in the last 7 years. When are you coming out of the wilderness? Maybe that wilderness isn't a testing and proving stage anymore. Maybe that wilderness is a place of judgment because you're not living in obedience to the Torah. You're not living in obedience to his instructions. You're not living in obedience to the things he's even asked you to. And the thing we have to realize is we need discernment and discipleship to know the difference. One, you need to develop a spirit of discernment within yourself to be able to see that. But even bigger than that, you need to be involved in some sort of discipleship where you have people around you that'll help you go, hey, honey, I don't think that's a testing ground. I think this is judgment. What are you doing? How do we need to get this straight? What do we need to do to fix this? Continuing on in the portion in verse 26, Adonai then said to Moses and Aaron, saying, how long will this wicked community be grumbling against me? I have heard the complaints of Israel grumbling against me. So then tell them, as surely as I live, says Adonai, I will do to you just as I heard you say in my ears. In this very wilderness your bodies will drop, every one of you 20 years of age and older, who was numbered in the census and grumbled against me. So I think that's interesting. I don't think I've ever paid attention to the last half of that, right? Who was numbered in the census and grumbled against me. So there's 2 different elements going on there. See, Moses, Aaron, Joshua would all have been in that age group. Like they would have fit the description. But they didn't grumble against me. They didn't grumble against him. And I'm sure there's more that were saved because of that. There was probably some that were like, I didn't grumble against you. And Yah sought their heart and was like, yeah, you didn't. You can live. But all those who were numbered in the census, so they were 20 and older, and who grumbled against him, did not get to see the promised land. And I'm sure there were some that were probably like, oh, he didn't know. I might have grumbled a little bit, but I didn't do it out loud. Well, Numbers 32 tells us, be sure that your sins will find you out. And I'm sure that even if they did it in secret, they would have died in the wilderness. And people would have been like, oh, he must have done that too. Numbers 14, verse 30. Not one of you will enter the land about which I lifted my hand to make home for you, except Caleb, son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, son of Nun. As for your children, whom you said would be like plunder, I will bring them in, and they will experience the land that you spurned. But your bodies will drop in this wilderness. Your children will be herdsmen in the wilderness for 40 years. They will suffer because of your unfaithfulness until your corpses are consumed in the wilderness. Because of their lack of faith, their children were going to have to be herdsmen and strive for 40 years. For 40 years, corresponding to the number of 40 days you explored the land, 1 year for each day, you will suffer for your iniquities and know my hostility. I, Adonai, have spoken and certainly will do this to all this wicked community banding together against me. In this wilderness they will meet their end, and there they will die. Then the men whom Moses had sent to explore the land, who had returned and caused the whole community to grumble against Adonai, spreading a bad report about the land. These men, spreading the bad report about the land, died of the plague in Adonai's presence. Right there, in the wilderness. in Adonai's presence. The one who was spreading the slanderous report, defaming the name of Yah. And it's all because this is all the result of them slandering the name of Yah. Verse 38, of those men who had gone to explore the land, only Joshua, son of Nun, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh, survived. When Moses related these things to all the children of Israel, the people mourned bitterly. They rose the next morning and went up to the high mountain, saying, look, let's go up to the place which Adonai promised, for we have sinned. So they're like, all right, we saw that, we sinned, we're not going to do it again, now we're going to go up and take it. Adonai promised us, we're going to go take it. But Moses said, he's warning them, why are you disobeying the mouth of Adonai? That will never succeed. You should not go up, because Adonai will not be among you, and you will be defeated before your enemies. For the Amalekites and the Canaanites are there in front of you, and you will fall by the sword. Adonai will not be with you, because you turned away from following him. But presumptuously they went up to the high mountain country, though neither the ark of Adonai's covenant nor Moses moved from within the camp. So again, they're not following the regulations that Yah said. God said, you're not moving unless by the word of Moses and by the cloud moving. Excuse me. And neither of those were happening. But they said, we're going up. The Amalekites and Canaanites living in the mountain country came down, attacked them, and beat them down all the way to Hormah. Any questions on chapter 14? You write those in the comments. And we're going to keep trudging along. Numbers 15. This is where it gets really good. Numbers 15. Again, Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you enter the land that I am giving you, where you will make your homes, and you are presenting a fire offering to Adonai, a burnt offering or a sacrifice to mark fulfilling a vow, a freewill offering or during a Moedim, to present a pleasing aroma to Adonai from the herd or from the flock. The one bringing the offering is to present a grain offering of 1/10 of an ephah of flour mixed with 1/4 of a hin of oil. Now with each lamb for the burnt offering or sacrifice, you are to prepare 1/4 of a hin of wine as a drink offering. With a ram you are to prepare 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with 1/3 of a hin of oil, and 1/3 of a hin of wine as a drink offering. You are to offer it as a pleasing aroma to Adonai. Whenever you are to prepare a young bull for a burnt offering, a special vow offering, or a fellowship offering to Adonai, bring with the young bull a grain offering of 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with 1/2 of a hin of oil. You are also to offer a drink offering as 1/2 a hin of wine as a fire offering, a pleasing aroma of Adonai. This is to be done for each bull or ram, for each young goat or lamb. Do this for each one, for as many as you prepare. Everyone native born is to do these things like so when bringing the offering that is pleasing aroma to Yah. So he's saying this is what every native born Israelite is to do when they bring the fire offerings to Yah. They're supposed to bring it with grain, flour, and wine. Verse 14, whenever an outsider resides with you, or whoever is among you for your generations to come, and he is to present a fire offering as a fragrant aroma to Adonai, as you do, he must do exactly the same as you are doing. So we just talked about a native born is doing these things, and now it says whenever an outsider resides. Now, this word outsider is the word ger, and the word resides is sometimes translated as sojourn. So the word ger is someone who is outside of the camp but has joined themselves, right? So a ger sojourning with you is someone who is not native born but has turned to the God of Israel and submitted to him, right? So if you have turned, we're not native Israelites, But if we have turned to the God of Israel and we have submitted to him and submitted to his teachings and his instructions, we are now considered outside residents. Well, how many times have you ever heard somebody say when we talk about, oh, but we're not Jews? Oh, we're not Jews. Okay. That's understandable, whatever. But I mean, even when people say, oh, we're not Israel. We have people that don't believe that we have to become part of Israel, that we're part of Israel. Well, this right here removes their excuses. It doesn't matter if we're part of Israel. If we are an outside resident, right? If we are not native, but we have turned to the God of Israel and submitted to him, then we must do exactly the same thing that the native is doing. That removes all excuses. There's no excuses. It doesn't matter what you think. If you are submitted to the God of Israel, then you must do exactly the same thing he commanded the children of Israel to do. Now, I'm going to say this, and it's probably going to tick some people off, but I'm okay with this. I'm okay. I'm okay with this, okay? If you want to claim the promises that Yah gave to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the children of Israel, you ready for it? You have to obey the terms of the covenant. There's no way around it. There is no way around it. If you want to claim the promises, you have to obey the terms. Listen carefully. The word sojourn that we just read, it means to turn aside from. If you turn aside from something, you are turning towards something. Right? You don't get the things that they got as Israel without turning aside from your desires and submitting or turning to the covenant that Yah laid out for Israel. Now, if you don't want to align yourself with the covenant, that's fine. That's fine. But do not go around claiming the blessings of Abraham and wondering why you aren't seeing them manifest in your life while you are profaning the name of Yah. Okay, I'm coming off my soapbox now. You don't get the promises if you don't obey the terms. There's no way around it. Verse 15. The community will have the same rule for you as well as for the resident outsider. It will be a lasting statute throughout your generations. As for you, so for the outsider will it be before Adonai. The same Torah and the same regulations will apply to both you and the outsider residing among you. Bottom line. Yah only has one set of instructions, and we need to do our part to love him enough to obey the ones we can. We've talked about that. I just released a podcast about how do you pick what to obey. Do I have to obey all of that? Go check it out, because I lay out in that podcast. Me and my wife talk about the guidelines for understanding the Torah and understanding the commandments and the instructions that Yah gave us and how we know what we're supposed to do. So check it out. You can see that on our website, 517ministries.com, or you can find us 517 Ministries Equipping to Equip podcast on most of your major podcast networks. Verse 17, Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel. Say to them, when you enter the land which I am taking you, and you eat some of the food of the land, you are to offer a portion to Adonai. You are to offer a cake from the first of your ground up meal as an offering from your threshing floor. So you are to lift it up. Throughout your generations to come, you are to give this offering from the first of your ground up meal. Now, we're getting ready to go into the last kind of half of this, which is going to all tie together. So let's pay attention to this, because this is going to be really important. Verse 22, if you unintentionally fail So he's talking about all the commandments he's given us so far. If you unintentionally fail, and he's speaking to the children of Israel, not keeping any of these mitzvot, commandments, that Adonai related to Moses. That is, anything that Adonai commanded you through Moses' hand, from the day Adonai commanded and onward throughout your generations. And it is done unintentionally, out of sight of the community, then the entire community is to offer one young bull from the herd for a burnt offering as a pleasing aroma to Adonai, along with its appropriate grain offering and drink offering, and one male goat as a sin offering. So the Cohen will make atonement for the entire community of the children of Israel, and they will be forgiven. For it was unintentional, and they brought a fire offering and their sin offering to Adonai for their error. So the whole community of Israel, along with the outsider residing among them, will be forgiven, for all the people were involved in unintentional wrongdoing. So who is Yah talking about here? Who is he talking about? He's talking about the entire congregation of Israel. So this is if the entire people of Israel unintentionally, whether like, we didn't hear that, I didn't know this, the entire community misses something, there's a means of forgiveness for that sin as a whole, as a community. So the greatest part is, I think this is a great demonstration of grace on display. We always think of grace as such a New Testament idea, but this is grace on display. That, look, if you unintentionally did this, then I'm going to give you a way to be cleansed from that. If but one person, should sin unintentionally, he is to bring a year-old female goat for a sin offering. So now he's talking about one person. So before it was the entirety of the community. If y'all miss something as a whole, there's forgiveness for that. Now we're talking about one person. Then the Cohen, the priest, is to make atonement before Adonai for that person who erred by sinning without intent, and he is to be forgiven when atonement has been made for him, whether a native born of Israel or an outsider living among them. One Torah, one set of instructions applies to you for the one sinning unintentionally. So we have to see this picture of grace and mercy have been since the beginning. This isn't a New Testament idea. I mean, so many people talk about that there's this new thing of grace that comes in when Yeshua comes on the scene and dies for our sins. Grace has been from the beginning. And we're going to keep seeing that. So let's look at this idea of grace. Grace in the Hebrew is the word chen, and it means favor or grace. We read this scripture last week when it talked about Noah finding favor in God's eyes, Abraham finding favor in God's eyes. This is the word grace. So the children of Israel, after sinning unintentionally, still had to bring a sacrifice, right? They sinned unintentionally. They still had to bring a sacrifice. Now, one thing I want to point out is that grace did not forgive their sin, but it eased the punishment required. It eased the punishment required. Because what does Scripture say in Romans? The wages of sin is death, right? That doesn't say the wages of intentional sin is death. It says the wages of all sin is death. So unintentional or not, the punishment should be death for your sin. The price that is required for your sin is death, whether it's intentional or unintentional. But through this, Yah is giving grace and mercy towards the unintentional sin. You see, grace is a gift free of cost, but not free of responsibility. And that's what we're seeing here. Grace didn't forgive their sins. It just eased the punishment. It eased that responsibility. The responsibility is still there. The grace was free, but it did not free them of the responsibility of what had been done, of their sin. You see, Yeshua carries the penalty, the responsibility of our sin, right? So when he died on the cross, that grace is still a free gift. We're still given grace. But he said, you know what, I'm going to step in and I'm going to carry the weight of that penalty. I'm going to carry the weight of that responsibility. I'm going to become their sacrifice to take the place of that. So really, when we sin, we should feel the weight of that responsibility. Every time you sin and you come back to the Father and ask for forgiveness, you should feel the weight of knowing that, yes, he forgave you, but that Yeshua is now carrying the weight of that responsibility. That you don't have to pay that. So back into the portion in Numbers 15. But the person who sins defiantly. So we talked about the person who sins unintentionally. And now we're going to get to the hard part. Because the person who sins defiantly, that word defiant, means on purpose. It denotes this idea of having a high hand, knowing what you're doing, and still doing it in spite of it. Whether native or outsider, again, this does not matter your relationship to Israel. Reviles Adonai, and that person is to be cut off from his people. Because he has despised the word of Adonai and has broken his commandment, that person will certainly be cut off. His guilt will remain on him. Peter uses this same language in Hebrews. So let's go over to Hebrews chapter 10. And Hebrews chapter 10 is probably one of my favorite books of the Bible, or chapters of any book of the Bible. We could sit all day talking about Hebrews chapter 10, because it's, when you unpackage that, it's just phenomenal. But we're going to read just a little bit. Starting in verse 25. And do not neglect our own meetings, as is the habit of some, but encourage one another, and all the more so as you see the day approaching. For if we keep on sinning willfully, after we have received the knowledge of the truth, there no longer remains a sacrifice for sin. So in their day, when they sinned unintentionally, they were allowed to bring a sacrifice to atone for that. We have the blood of Yeshua that atones for that. But if we keep on sinning willfully, the same thing, with a high hand, on purpose, after we know better, there no longer remains a sacrifice for sins, but only a terrifying expectation of judgment and a fury of fire about to devour the enemies of God. Anyone who rejects the Torah of Moses dies without compassion on the word of 2 or 3 witnesses. How much more severe do you think the punishment will be for the one who has trampled the Son of God underfoot, and has regarded as unholy the blood of the covenant by which he was made holy, and has insulted the Spirit of grace? For we know the one who said, vengeance is mine, I will repay. And again, Adonai will judge his people. It is a terrifying thing to fall into the hands of the living God. Peter is using the same Hebraic language here as we just read in Numbers. It's the same thing. He's talking the same thing. He is saying, those of you who sin deliberately and despise the blood of the covenant are insulting that grace we were just talking about. And you will bear the weight of the responsibility and punishment. Now, keep in mind what Yah's just told them as we finish out this chapter. So he's just talked to them about what to do if they sin unintentionally. They should not sin intentionally. That they will be cut off if they sin on purpose. Now let's keep going. This is an interesting story that kind of starts to wrap up this chapter. While the children of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a man gathering wood on the Shabbat. Those who found him gathering wood brought him to Moses, Aaron, and the entire assembly. They kept him under arrest, not being clear what was to be done to him. Adonai said to Moses, the man has to die. The whole assembly is to stone him with stones outside the camp. So the whole assembly took him outside the camp. They stoned him with stones. He died just as Adonai commanded him. That seems a little harsh. Just for gathering some sticks on Shabbat. So let's look at the details. Let's see if we can understand this a little bit more, because there's so much more to this story than what you first just read. So here's the details. Yah had just given them instructions regarding unintentional and intentional sins, right? Then it says they found him, implying it was being done secretly, and therefore he knew what he was doing. Knew what he was doing. Peter just told us that if you keep on sinning willfully after you have the knowledge of the truth, this guy knew what he was doing. And then it says he was getting wood. Now, if you look up this word wood in the Hebrew, it's not like he was just going out and collecting some sticks off the ground. The word wood there in Hebrew actually translates trees. So this was not an easy task. This is not just a simple, I'm going to walk through the woods, pick up a couple of sticks, and build a little fire. He was gathering wood, trees, possibly chopping down a tree. Like, this was major work, and he was doing it on Shabbat, which was supposed to be a day of rest. The Lord had commanded it to be a day of rest. So with that information, we look at all these details. What was Yah just setting an example of him? Like, was this just a way of God to say, all right, we just talked about this. You're not listening. I'm going to set an example out of you so that the rest of everybody will pay attention and listen. Is that what's going on here? I don't think exactly. I don't think Yah is just being a spiteful God just to set an example. So let's go back and look at verse 30 and 31 again. And let's pull out a couple other details that we'll see in this that might clear up some of this. So verse 30. But the person who sins defiantly, whether native or outsider, reviles Adonai, and that person is to be cut off from his people. Because he has despised the word of Adonai and has broken his commandment, that person will certainly be cut off. His guilt will remain on him. So this word person in the Hebrew is the word nephesh. And the word nephesh literally translates as soul. And I think this kind of becomes a little bit deeper than just a physical level of being cut off when we combine it with the last part of 31. Where the last part of 31 says his guilt will remain on him. This word guilt means iniquity or punishment. So his soul is going to be cut off and have to carry his own punishment. So who bore our iniquity? Yeshua. Yeshua bore our iniquities when he died on that cross, right? Now, let's tie this back to Hebrew. And we see, and what we really see is that this man no longer had a means of redemption from the penalty of his sin and would only pollute the others around him. So it was Yah's mercy on the rest of the camp to end his physical life to save the rest of them. Peter told us in Hebrews that if you keep on sinning willfully, there is now no longer a sacrifice. That's what this is telling us. When you keep on sinning, your guilt will remain on you. Your guilt cannot be transferred off of you. See, when they made the sacrifice, part of the sacrifice was a transference of punishment, a transference of guilt. It was something innocent taking your guilt and being slain for it. Such an amazing picture type of Yeshua coming and being slain for our guilt, for our punishment. The perfect lamb, the one without sin, took on our sin and took that penalty. But without that transference of guilt, without that transference of iniquity, there was no longer any way for him to get rid of that guilt. He could no longer approach the holiness of God. He could no longer participate in the feast. He could no longer do the certain things he needed in order to maintain closeness to Yah. So in order to keep him from polluting the rest of the camp, Yah said, I'm taking him out. See, we've seen this before when we've studied other portions. Yah's mercy doesn't always look pretty. Because Yah doesn't think in the now. Yah thinks big picture. He thinks generationally. And if he had allowed this man to stay in there, what would have happened to the rest of the camp? Just something to think about. And especially keep this in mind. Let's jump back to the portion. Because everything that we've read up until now in this chapter 15 and even into 14, it is all pointing to this last part of this Torah portion. This last part of Numbers 15. It explains the purpose of this last part. So let's keep reading. Verse 37. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel. Say to them that they are to make for themselves tzitzit on the corners of their garments throughout their generations, and they are to put a blue cord on each tzitzit. It will be your own tzitzit. So whenever you look at them, you will remember all the mitzvah of Adonai, and to do them, and not spying out after your own hearts and your own eyes, prostituting yourself. This way you will remember and obey all my mitzvot, and you will be holy to your God. I am Adonai your God. I brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am Adonai your God. So there really aren't very many instructions surrounding the tzitzit. So we're going to look at what the few instructions are, but then we're also going to look at the other references in Scripture that talk about this and kind of what we can take out of them. So one, we see there's 4 of them. You're supposed to put them in all 4 corners of your garments. There should be a cord of blue. And that they are a reminder to Shema, or hear and obey. They are a reminder of the commandments. They are a reminder of the covenant that you've made for Yah. But here's the thing that I thought was interesting as I was thinking about this and studying this out. Who are your tzitzits a reminder for? Who are they supposed to be a reminder for? If you're wearing tzitzits, I know when I wear mine, I rarely see my own tzitzits. Sometimes I'll touch them if I'm fidgeting or I put my hand in my pocket and I'll feel it and I'll touch it. But very rarely do I see my own tzitzit. My tzitzits are for others. So that if we come into contact out in public, you see mine and it is a reminder to you. I see yours and it is a reminder to me. Oh, there's somebody else following the covenant. That's right. I've got to make sure I maintain this covenant. Because that's what they are. They are a sign of the covenant. And if we think about, if we kind of put this in the context of what we just read about the man who is gathering the wood on Shabbat, this is why they're so important, because they have the power to save a soul. They have the power to save a nefesh. They have a power to keep somebody from getting cut off from the presence of Yah. And it's interesting, we start looking, you start seeing these things pop up in Scripture, and you see the power that the tzitzits hold. Malachi 4:2. But for you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness will rise with healings in its wings, and you will go forth and frolic like calves from the stall. Now this word wings here in the Hebrew is actually corners. It's not tzitzit. But where were the tzitzits placed? On the corners of the garments. And what's really neat is if you look up tzitzit in the Brown Drivers Briggs Concordance, it defines tzitzit as, look at this, a floral or wing-like projection, a tassel. So Malachi is saying the Son of Righteousness is going to rise with healing in its wings, in its tzitzit. Now, y'all might not know this, but this prophecy of the prophet Malachi was actually fulfilled. And you might be, what? It was fulfilled? Let's look at the book of Luke. And there was a woman with a blood flow for 12 years who could not be healed by anyone. She came up from behind and touched the edge of Yeshua's garment. Immediately, her blood flow stopped. This word edge in the Greek is kraspadon, and it means fringe or tassel. Fringe or tassel. Now, doesn't that sound like something we're talking about? Well, if you cross-reference this, the Hebrew equivalent of this word is zitzit. So the woman with the issue of blood was healed when she touched the zitzit of Yeshua's garment, fulfilling the prophet Malachi when he said the Son of Righteousness will rise with healing in his zitzits. And the only thing I could think about when I was reading this today is the story when Peter's shadow fell on people and they were healed. How amazing would it be if you could get so close to Yah that your zitzits would heal people? That someone could walk up to you, they'd see that and know that what that sign represented and try to press through to touch that to receive their healing from Yah. There's power. So then the question becomes, why aren't you wearing yours? Just throwing this out there. Maybe stepping on a couple toes. Why aren't you wearing yours? Don't overlook the seemingly small instructions to pursue the seemingly big ones. Yah has meaning and power in all of his mitzvot. All of his mitzvot have meaning and power. So as little and minuscule and as little detail as we have about what the zitzits are for, don't overlook them. Don't overlook the small thing. Be obedient to it just as obedient as you are about Shabbat. Be obedient to it just as obedient as you are about the Moedim. Let all of his instructions carry that same weight and meaning. Your zitzit could be the tool that brings healing and restoration into someone's life, both physically and spiritually. You know, someone could be having a hard time and see your zitzits and know what they are and could bring them back into the circle of Yah. So your zitzit could be a tool that helps heal people. Just keep that in mind. So that wraps it up. That's any questions on chapter 15? You can write them in the comments. Send us an email, info@517ministries.com, and we'll do our best to get back with you and answer those questions. But guys, that is Torah portion Shelach Lecha, numbers 13 through 15. I know there's a lot of heavy stuff in that. And I feel like the next couple of portions are going to have some similar things. They're going to have some similar weight to them, just like the last portion was. But we're getting to the place where Yah's getting fed up with a people that won't set apart themselves and obey and listen to his voice after everything he's done for them. And I feel like we can relate so much to that. Like, everything Yah has done for us, the least we can do is be obedient to his voice. Well, guys, that's all we have for this portion. May the Lord bless you and keep you. Until next time.